For me, in a show filled with action like Avatar, two categories are immediately created in my head for a main villain, or a primary antagonist. One, in terms of ability, how strong is this character, and how big of a threat does this character pose to the main protagonist? And two, how does this character make me feel, when everything's said and done? Azula of the Fire Nation embodies everything a villain should be, with flawless voice acting by Great Delisle. Azula has the confidence and drive of a general, the skill and strength and abilities of a final boss, and the intelligence of a master tactician, all at 14 years old. To begin, let's talk about her skill. The first thing to note is that Azula is almost perfect, a hair out of place. Azula does not lose. She has had many close calls, one against Aang and Katara in the catacombs, and the second due to the falling rocks and water against Aang on the drill. The latter I do not consider a fair fight. With this, Azula dominates all but 2 fights in the show. As it is always said, Azula is a firebending prodigy. Azula uses a precise and powerful form of firebending. In most of her attacks, we see her using 2 fingers, while other firebenders use a closed fist or an open palm. This is because Azula focuses her chi into a smaller, more accurate point, which makes her fire burn hotter, thus making it more powerful. She bends a dark blue fire, which displays the intensity of not only her flames, but herself as well, unlike any other character in the show. In addition to her firebending, she displays incredible athleticism, agility, and acrobatics. Azula is also a very creative firebender, using fire as a propeller like a jet, creating rings and blades of fire, and having fire condensed to even cut through objects. Also, the Princess of the Fire Nation has a mastery of cold firebending, which we know as lightning. She performs this at devastating speeds and efficiency, and we see her perform this perfectly as well as savagely throughout the show. Even without her bending, she outlasted Toph, Aang, and Sokka with her acrobatics, athleticism, and agility alone. Even when she was not in the right state of mind, Azula was less precise, but we saw her sheer power. Azula's intelligence is well on par with her bending abilities. First, Azula is a master manipulator and strategist. She manipulates Ty Lee and Mei into joining her hunt for Zuko and Aang. She then sees the Kyoshi warriors and uses their identities to tear Ba Sing Se from the inside. With her supreme confidence and intimidation, she takes command over the Dai Li, penetrating the impenetrable city. The Prince of the Fire Nation is also an extremely proficient liar, successfully negating Toph's ability to sense lies through the person's heartbeat. Azula's aptitude leaves us with little hope every time she fights someone from the gang. She is void of monologuing, and she is cold, and every move is calculated. In the question I asked in the beginning, Azula is able to fit the first category perfectly. She's incredibly powerful, and poses to be the second biggest threat in the show after her father, Ozai. But what makes Azula a great villain is that even through all the hardships he provides to the gang, we still feel remorse for Azula at the end. We saw Azula at her highest point. She was made her father's right hand, and she ruled perfectly with an iron fist. We saw her perfection. Azula fulfilled her role as a villain. She made us despise her. The way she dominated her battles. Azula nearly killed Iroh, came extremely close to killing Aang in the Avatar state. She manipulated Zuko's ideals, the Dai Li, and even her friends. We witnessed Azula's genius, but we also saw her fall, and she had a slow, gradual breakdown when things began to fall out of line. Slowly, Mei left her, followed by Ty Lee, and Ozai decided to take down the Earth Kingdom without her, and her mental state deteriorated quickly as a result of this. Azula was raised by her father's ideals of power and strength, and this caused her to be ingrained with the same ideals as well. She wants power and attention, and when Ozai decided without her, that destroyed the one person she could hold on to, and the one person who she couldn't manipulate, and Azula became lonely, followed by her mental instability. Growing up with a father who only envisioned power, and without her mother's kind heart which Zuko inherited, it took a toll on her mind. Zuko had his mother's ideals and the guidance and knowledge of Iroh, and while he was bashed for it, Azula was praised for abiding by her father. She was unstable to the point where she began hallucinating of her long-gone mother, and she banished her entire staff, and then proceeded the bags under her eyes, followed by her being more than a hair out of place. Azula is my favorite villain because even though I love to hate her throughout the show, I felt so much compassion for her afterwards. When I saw Azula chained up, I expected to be happy, but when I saw her roar those beautiful blue flames, and she began crying, weeping even, a chill went down my back and I had goosebumps. Azula was finally humanized. I realized that I had rooted for her demise all the way up until her actual demise. I didn't want her defeat to be so heartbreaking. Azula was simply a girl who grew up in royalty, a girl who I watched crave power and later get destroyed by the same power that she so desperately desired.